Hey everybody, it's Hater. Welcome back to another build video. And in this one, I'm going to show you guys how you can have infinite ice turrets. But before we get into it, I just want to say thank you guys so much for all the love and support that was on the first build video, the Nova Warp video that I made before Season of the Lost. That is absolutely crazy and mind-boggling that my first ever PvE build video was so well received. So thank you guys from the bottom of my heart, and I'm going to keep making more builds for you guys. But enough said. If you guys enjoy the video and this build helps you out, go and leave a like, comment on the comment section things that you think could help or builds I should cover in the future. And if you really enjoy the content, then go ahead and subscribe, hit the bell to be notified. We post here every week. Now that we got all that out of the way, let's get into the video. Starting off with a little recap from my last video about Nova Warp. Bungie reworked the helmet Verity's brow. Instead of it giving you 10% grenade damage per sec, it's going to give you 20% more grenade damage per sec, and you now have to match your subclass type with your energy type on your weapons to gain the buff. At first glance, this is going to look like a nerf to some people, but it's actually more of a buff because you get more value out of matching your subclass type. Kind of making Verity's brow a jack of all trades for whatever subclass you're running. Then Bungie took it upon themselves to add both stasis weapons to the loot pool and a catalyst for Traveler's Chosen, both of which we'll talk in a moment. But let's start off with Traveler's Chosen's catalyst. For those that don't know what Traveler's Chosen does, when you get kills with Traveler's Chosen, it's going to give you a stack of Gathering Light, stacking all the way up to 10 times. For each stack that you have, it's going to increase your handling, your reload speed, and your target acquisition until you consume the stacks of light. Its other perk will let you consume those stacks of light by holding the reload button. For each stack that you consumed, you gain an increasing amount of ability energy to your grenade, melee, and rift, where one stack will give you like 5% for each, and 10 stacks will give you 100% for all three. As for what the new catalyst does, it allows it to turn it into a full auto sidearm, which is phenomenal because single tap sidearms were very bleh to use. But the other perk is what we're really looking at. It now gives Traveler's Chosen Osmosis. Basically what happens is whenever you throw a grenade, it will then change Traveler's Chosen into that element type until you swap off of it. What does this mean? It means you can combo Traveler's Chosen with every subclass in the game with Verity's brow and turn it into quite the jack of all trades for whatever build you want to run with it. If you want to run handheld Supernova, you can run Void. If you want to run bottom tree Dawnblade, you can run that. If you want to run top tree or bottom tree Stormcaller, you can also run that. But what we're really going to look at in today's video is the ability to create ice turrets with Traveler's Chosen. Pretty much at this point, you can just take Traveler's Chosen and Verity's brow and just use that for whatever you want. But that's not what we're going to do. We're going to do this better because we can make this much more insane. Starting off with the aspects and fragments you guys should be using with this build. First up is the most obvious, that is Bleak Watcher. Basically what happens is if you hold your grenade button, it allows you to consume your grenade and turn it into a ice turret. Fairly self-explanatory. As for the other, we're going to be using Ice Flare Bolts. Basically every time you kill a frozen target, it's going to create these seekers that will track the other enemies and freeze them, which will also create seekers seeking enemies to freeze them too. Next are the fragments that we're going to be using. First one is Whisper of Torment. Every time we take damage, we're going to gain grenade energy. And at this point, you can pretty much use whatever fragments you find comfortable, but I use Whisper of Shards. Whenever we destroy a stasis crystal, it's going to give us grenade energy back over a period of time. Basically, whenever we have an ice turret down, we can just get our grenade back and throw an ice wall, shatter those, and then gain our grenade energy back. Next is Whisper of Rending. Our kinetic weapon is going to deal more damage to stasis crystals, and we deal more damage to frozen targets. And finally, Whisper of Bonds. Every time we kill a frozen target, it's going to give us more super energy. And that just about covers the fragments and aspects I recommend you guys using. Like I said before, this is pretty interchangeable, so feel free to use whatever you want after Whisper of Torment. Next up are going to be the mods. Starting off with the big elephant in the room, that is Particle Deconstruction. If you haven't heard about this mod, you are quite literally living under a rock. But what it does is whenever you hit a target with a fusion rifle or a linear fusion rifle, it's going to debuff them and add a stacking debuff up to 5 times linear fusion rifle or fusion rifle damage. Think of it like stacking Melting Point, but for only fusion rifles and linear fusion rifles. This is going to be the bread and butter of all your main damage sources in this build. And we'll talk about what fusion rifles and linear fusion rifles I recommend you guys using later on in the video. Next up is going to be Resonance Siphon. What this mod does is whenever a champion is stunned by you or you're a member of your fire team, you gain energy for both your grenade and melee. The reason we use this mod is because if you don't know about freezing targets, it completely resets the stun on unstoppable and overload champions. So whenever they get frozen, you can just reapply the stuns and farm the energy off of them. I feel like this is not intended, and Bungie is probably going to put a timer on it, but so far, use it while you have it. Next mod on the list is going to be Impact Induction. Whenever you deal damage with your melee attack, it's going to give you grenade energy. You can do this around every 5 seconds to gain 30% of your grenade energy. Very useful. Next are going to be a series of Elemental Well mods. Basically, Elemental Wells, whenever you pick them up, it's going to give you energy to whatever your lowest ability is. And if it matches your subclass, then it's going to give you ability energy for all of your abilities. First of them going to be Elemental Armaments. Basically, you have a increasing chance to get a Elemental Well to spawn off of gun kills. Next is going to be Font of Might. Whenever you pick up an Elemental Well, it's going to give you a damage bonus to whatever element your subclass is for 10 seconds. Then we're going to use Elemental Charge. Whenever we pick up an Elemental Well, it's going to give us a stack of Charge with Light. If it matches our subclass though, it's going to give us 2 stacks of Charge with Light. And finally, this final slot is really universal for whatever you want to use, but you have 3 options that I recommend. First is going to be Firepower. Whenever you have a stack of Charge with Light and you throw your grenade, it's going to give you grenade energy back, consuming 1 stack of Charge with Light. You could also use Energy Converter, where whenever you throw your grenade, it'll consume all stacks of Charge with Light, giving you super energy up to a maximum of 50% of your super. And finally, you could just be lazy and slot in High Energy Fire, gaining increased damage to your weapons until you kill something, consuming 1 stack of Charge with Light per kill. And that pretty much just covers the mods that we can use at the moment. Now, let's talk about the weapons you should be running with this build. And since we talked about particle deconstruction, I think that's a good starting point to talk about. And there are realistically many videos already made out there by, Aztecross, etc., who covered what fusion rifles and linears you really should be looking to use. I'm just going to prattle off a few that I recommend running with this build. Starting off with Null Composure, which you earn from a quest right now until it's added to the monument. This thing is a rapid fire fusion rifle that rolls a static roll of Feeding Frenzy or Heating Up, and Reservoir Burst or High Impact Reserves. This will pretty much be your go-to fusion rifle until you can earn a Cartesian Coordinate with Feeding Frenzy and Vorpal Weapon for that extra damage. Then for the heavy slot, you would be using a Threaded Needle, which is the legendary linear from Battlegrounds. This is quite possibly the hardest hitting linear fusion rifle we have in the game. If you can get a roll of Autoloading Holster Vorpal Weapon or Clown Cartridge Vorpal Weapon, then you've got the hardest hitting linear in the game. As for exotic heavies, you can use the 1000 Voices for burst damage or the God Sleeper Simulant for more precision based fights. And you can even use Lawrence Driver in the energy slot for more ad clear based loadouts. But that would mean you would have to be running a kinetic weapon to use with Verity's Brow. And it just so happens that Bungie added stasis weapons to the game that you can use. One of them being the Peace Bond sidearm that you earn from Iron Banner. Now this sidearm is really interesting because it can roll the new perk Headstone, where if you land a headshot, it's going to create a stasis crystal on the target's body. That's really interesting for certain builds like what I'm doing with ice walls and shards. You shoot the crystal, it explodes, and you'll get your grenade energy back. It's pretty good synergy, but I have not pulled one yet myself. As for the other roles you can look for it, you can even get Demolitionist on it for even more synergy, and still maintain an unstoppable sidearm. But if you happen to have a Last Breath from Prophecy, you can go for a anti-barrier role with Subsistence or Demolitionist and Osmosis to keep the Osmosis trend going. Unfortunately, when it comes to overload in this build, you could run the mod Thermoclastic Strike and still have overload on your melee, but it'd be still too inconsistent. Instead, I would either use Overload Bow and just use whatever bow you can find because there's no Osmosis bows in the game, or you can just use a sword and just use Overload Sword. Either way, the build is still very flexible and allows you to change a lot of things out to make it work. And that, I think, is going to cover the stasis turret build for today. Remember guys, if you enjoyed the video, go and leave a like, leave a comment on the comment section if you think there's anything that could help this build for other people watching this video. And if you want me to do anything in the future. Also, if you really like the content, go and subscribe, hit the bell to be notified. Go support me over at my Twitch at twitch.tv/HaterTheOne. I stream every single day besides Saturday. I play Destiny 2, and I also do Verity over there. But I think that's going to be it for me, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.